I'm James Toney, class of 2001, and I'm currently teaching in Singapore. I've been overseas since 2005 in various locations, including Japan, Venezuela, Qatar, and I'm at my second school in Singapore now. But most schools, at least schools worth their salt, want 2 years of teaching experience as a minimum. So it makes the most sense and will probably just be the easiest for undergrads to try to get some experience first. And also the cultural shock, like living overseas isn't easy, and every situation you get into is a little different. So at least if you can wake up in the morning when you eventually experience culture shock, which happens at different times and for different amounts of times for different people, at least you can wake up and say, you know what, at least I know how to teach. So like this day is gonna go as good as it can get because I know what to do when I'm in the classroom and I'll figure all the other stuff out. But if you also don't know how to teach on top of dealing with a new culture, a new experience, being away from home, I feel like it would be a lot and I wouldn't recommend it. 100%, 200%, because a friend of mine who I ran the African Cultural Society with graduated a year before me. And so while I was in Adelaide, I went to visit him while he was teaching in Japan because it was 2000 year of the Olympics. And so they gave us like an extended break to go and enjoy the Olympics in Sydney. And I also just added Tokyo because I'm like, I don't know when I'll be on this side of the world ever again. And I went and like stayed in his town while he was participating in a jet program. And so that's what put that in my head, which ended up being the first like program that I joined when I moved overseas. For me, friends and family said I was going to end up being a teacher, and I was like, absolutely not. That's not what I see for myself at all. But I say a combination of seeing his experiences because I went to school with him while I visited this friend that I mentioned and doing the jet program, going into classrooms and just seeing the type of energy the kids were giving him. I have a single mom, two little brothers, and so every year in the summer I was getting them ready for school. Yet another reason why my friend said I would probably become a teacher. And I'd say I did teach for America for 4 years in Los Angeles. So when I came back from studying abroad in Adelaide, I wasn't really sure what my path should be. And yet another graduate friend who graduated a year before me came back to William and Mary and gave like a workshop on Teach for America. And so since we were close friends, he sort of talked me into applying. And so I think I just fell in love with it while I was doing Teach for America, but not like that it was part of my plan. In Houston, we trained in Houston for a month and a half for the summer after I graduated in '01. And I was a middle school teacher there, which is funnily enough like the grade I teach now. But I started off in grade two and I did 2 and 4 in Los Angeles and then ended up like slowly moving up as I've been overseas and I'm now teaching eighth grade. Say pros and cons of like every grade. Like people who know me now can't imagine me teaching grade two, but I just loved their thoughtfulness, their energy in particular. Like going through September 11th in the classroom, it was my third week of teaching. Me trying to process what was going on in real time as a recent grad. I think I was still 21. I hadn't even turned 22 yet. Um, and having these 7-year-olds just questioning everything and like the song that you play every day, Mr. Toney, can we dedicate it to the people who died? And like, why would anyone want to do this? And they just had so many questions that I was like welling up trying to answer. Yeah, just their earnestness and honesty and inquisitiveness, I think were my favorite parts of teaching 7-year-olds. And I never really pictured myself. Actually, at my work study at William and Mary, like there's a daycare center, at least there was one across the
Mhm.
street, I think for 2 semesters, with 3 and 4 year olds. And so I was like okay with working with younger kids, but it wasn't part of the plan. Like I was hoping for more like late elementary, middle school, which I think is my sweet spot. But again, I love the earnestness of grade two students. It's a combination of the innocence and the energy and the enthusiasm about school, but they're also started becoming their own person and figuring things out for themselves. They're not afraid to question the teacher at certain ages. I say like maybe that's more 6, 7, 8 or 7, 8. They're very strong in their opinions and they like to it's just fun watching them form. And I didn't really like middle school as a kid, and so I just cringed thinking about puberty and teenage hormones and whatever. But just seeing them go through it, you sort of feel for them, and like they really appreciate teachers who sort of understand what they're going through and give them a little bit of space and some forgiveness when they make mistakes. Last year was my first year in grade eight, and I think I've had the best connection with grade eight students that I've had since teaching like fourth and fifth grade back in Los Angeles. just because they appreciate me just sort of giving them second, third, and fourth and fifth chances when they're making adolescent mistakes. I would say that personally, that sort of became like my raison d'etre for being overseas. Of like, I was sort of feeling like the schools in Los Angeles could use more teachers of color, people from the communities I grew up in inner city Baltimore. Like, what am I doing overseas? You know, like, do they really need me over here? And talking with friends back home, most of the schools I work at, I'm one of a few Black teachers that these kids end up having. Um, and there might be multiculturalism with the students, but for most international schools, like the teaching population isn't that multicultural. And so I try to share the experiences and just connect the dots for all the places that I've been. Like, I moved to the new place, I'm talking about the last couple of places that I've lived and sharing what it's like for the students there. From Los Angeles, I'm passing on the stories of my students in Los Angeles to these more affluent students in these international schools that I'm working for. And so I sort of take it. I wouldn't say everyone I work with feels the same way, but I sort of ally and partner and in friendship with the other teachers who feel like even though we're teaching in a bubble and we're teaching affluent kids, they're going to have power. They already have money. Like they're going to need to know how to wield that power when they come out of this bubble, especially in Singapore. It's safe. They're in an American school getting an American curriculum. And even the next layer, it's like you can speak English. It's sort of easy to get around. That's why it's the most expensive city in the world, but lots of people stay for a very long time because it's just easy. So I make it a point to try to like share experiences outside of the bubble that we live in. And especially with the amount of like mixed Asian students that we have, about some of the possible experiences, because a lot of them look forward of going to the US or UK for university if they don't end up staying in Singapore or going somewhere else, Australia. And so it's like they don't really know what the world is like except for what they see on the internet. And I don't want it to be a slap in the face. So yeah, since I'm their language arts teachers and I sort of get to, and I'm also the department chair, so I get to sort of have a say in the books we're using and like the materials we're putting in front of students. I make it a personal point to make sure they're hearing diverse perspectives. So my dream, I love Japan, and English teaching and starting off my career there was amazing. I would have loved to stay there. Another bit of advice is you sometimes get typecasted. I guess that's with any field, right? And so since I was an English teacher, they were looking at my resume when I tried to apply to international schools in Japan when I found out about international schools my second year as, oh, it's just some English teacher who was reaching out. Like they didn't really check my CV to see that I taught in LA, I had a master's, like I have 4 years of experience. It was just like this person on the JET program is trying to get into our schools. And so they didn't really pay much attention to me. So yeah, a couple of times in my careers, I've sort of had to prove myself of like either go get other training or like sort of separate myself from my goal, do some stuff and then try to come back. But I guess that's the same for any field. Like there's something called PYP. It's like IB for elementary school, International Baccalaureate. So like I didn't have training for that. So a couple of schools were like, oh, you don't have this training. So I spent one of my summers getting the training. Yeah. And that kind of stuff happens. Like you'll apply to certain schools that you've been aiming for and find out like they do a certain curriculum that you may not have experienced. And so they assume as an American, you don't know how to grasp it or whatever. And honestly, at the American school, we do the same thing. If we see people who don't have experience with Common Core standards and they're applying to our school, we have a bit of a bias and like, hey, we'd rather take somebody who has experience with Common Core. So, works both ways. And maybe it's not right. You should give people a chance, but I don't know. That's just the way it ends up sometimes, I guess. I'd say so there were intermediaries. Like when I first got in the game, so the English teaching is a JET program. I found out my second year about international schools. There were intermediaries that you sort of like send your resume to. You can post them online. And I won't say the names now because I feel like it's less relevant post COVID. Because why pay an intermediary to like hold on to your references and your resume and like wait. Most schools now have pretty functional portals where you can just apply directly to the school. So I would recommend that after people get a bit of experience, they can take the 2 to 4 years that they're teaching in the States and like research where they actually want to go, where they can see themselves, maybe even go on a visit. A lot of schools like it and are okay with like if you reach out to them and just mention, hey, I'm going to be in town for a week or two. Is it okay if I stop by, teach a demo lesson, meet somebody? I did that when I wanted to go back to Japan from Doha. Like I took while visiting friends, I'm like, can I stop by like my dream school? And like had a like pseudo interview with the head of school there to get your foot in the door. Like just you don't really need the intermediates, I feel, these days, because you can do this. You can jump on Zoom if you make it to the next stage. You can apply directly in the school's portal. So you can look those up and they still exist, but I just feel like is my experience is I'm the department chair, so I'm involved in hiring at my school. Most people just go through the school system, and then if they get shortlisted, then it ends up being like a Zoom conversation like this. So it's possible to do on your own with research, and there's so many schools out there. Um, at least start with ones that have a website and probably a portal that you can apply. If they don't have those two things, probably a little shaky.